Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Golden Astrologer Podcast. This is Deb McBride, and I am here in rainy, as you can probably hear, Escazú, Costa Rica, on Sunday, the 28th of September in the year 2025. And we are in the last stages of the eclipse period. Okay, so the eclipses are over. Yay! The eclipses are over. And we have this next week before the full moon on Monday, the 6th of October. These are the last days of September. And when we go into that full moon, the eclipse season will be finished. That's it. Done. No more. For another 6 months. In the meantime, this has been a hell of a week. It's been a hell of a week. That eclipse was the lesser in strength one, but when astrology doesn't happen in a vacuum, like I told you, there were so many things following the eclipse, meaning the sun did the eclipse and then went into Libra, went into a new sign, and then provoked all the outer planets. And then the next day, Mars squared Pluto, and Mars was accompanied by the moon, and they were in Scorpio, and they squared Pluto. Astrology does not happen in a vacuum, because we could say, Mars square Pluto caused this. It was the whole enchilada, the whole kit and caboodle, the eclipses, the sun traversing that realm of Libra early where it's triggering all the outer planets, and then the Mars square Pluto just gave it the final go-ahead to disrupt everything. So for me, this was particularly difficult because I started to notice on Tuesday, as Mars and Pluto were getting revved up, on Tuesday I noticed that my cat was not herself and that she was, a little bit maybe a little too sleepy, maybe didn't want to go out so much, maybe wasn't feeling herself. But I chalked it up to the planets because our little fur friends, our fur babies, they are all sensitive, especially cats, to energies and, all sorts of things like thunderstorms too. Animals are, sensitive too, but fireworks, thunderstorms, but eclipse energies do not escape our furry friends. So if your dog has not been their usual self, or your cat, that could be part of it. And so I accepted it as part of it. And then on Wednesday, I started to notice that something was oozing out of her mouth. And I thought, this isn't good. And then I noticed her behavior. She was really not happy. She clearly was in pain or something was wrong. And so I ran up to the vet on Wednesday, the 24th, with photographs of what was going on. And he said to me, I have to see the cat. And I said, okay. And so we scheduled something for Thursday morning. And so began the drama of my week, which is that my poor little girl needed to have 2 teeth removed because they weren't good. And he did that Friday morning. So I left her there Thursday night, and then I called them on Friday afternoon, and they told me that, she could stay another night because they thought it was better for her. So I have never had to get her to a carrier before. So that was a whole thing. And then my friend next door drove me up there. It's really around the corner, but still, you got to get the cat in the carrier. You got to get them into the office. She doesn't know what's going on. And she was so extremely well behaved. But suffice to say, long story short, she's home now, and I have to take her for an exam, a few exams this week just to see how she's feeling, doing, healing, and giving her more painkiller shots. So that all blew up my life all week. You'll notice I didn't very much post. After the first day of posting that my blog was up and my podcast was up, I did that like Monday, Tuesday, and then everything blew up after that. And I just, Instagram fell by the wayside because my attention was focused on all of this. And, this is like my child. I don't have children. So, emotionally, this was took a lot of my energy and time and focus, and the energy that we use to worry, that definitely has something to do with the energy that takes up our time. As Joe Dispenza says, where you put your attention is where you put your energy. And so there you go. Well, now the eclipses are over and we are moving out of this season, thankfully. And so there's going to be some lingering eclipse hangover energy in this coming week. For me, it's taking the cat back to the vet for a few times, which is never fun because you got to get them in a carrier, like I said. So it's then also whatever has erupted in these last few days, it's gonna take this next week to shake out. So I have another Virgo friend who's got a lot of construction going on in her property, and the Virgo, all that Virgo energy really does affect us in those regions of our charts. So this is important to pay attention to as we sort of wind down and wind out and clear up all of this energy. Now we are in Libra season, so we're past Virgo. We've got past Virgo almost immediately after the eclipse, and so we are now dealing with energies that remain in Virgo, energies in Libra, and then also now Scorpio, because as we know, Mars went into Scorpio a week ago, last Monday. So it's been complicated because, now we have other dynamics happening. But Mars is in Scorpio, which is good for sort of setting yourself straight and being focused and determining and that goal that you have and keeping at that goal that you have and working with that energy. We start to think, oh no, Scorpio, what darkness is going to befall me? But it's really using it to go deep into the focus and deep into the energy and deep into whatever project or creative adventure we are on, or spiritual. Scorpio's all that night energy, all that void energy. And so this week is going to really, I feel, shake out a lot of this eclipse stuff. Okay. Now we have one more planet in the sign of Virgo. One planet remains in the sign of Virgo near the South Node, and that planet is Venus, which means that Venus is going to pass over the eclipse point at 29 Virgo, not for a couple weeks yet, but she will visit that point and she'll oppose Saturn in that process, So we're waiting on that last planet in Virgo to sort of move over that eclipse point and then be done. But she's not even at the point where the sun was when it was during the first eclipse. So we've got some time yet. What Venus is going to do is she's going to greet the South Node, and that is next Saturday. That would be Saturday the 4th of October. And she's going to greet the South Node, and that's going to sort of trigger maybe some of this eclipse energy, because the first eclipse was at 15 degrees Virgo, and she'll pass that this week. She'll pass that in a few days, and then she'll get to where the South Node is on Saturday. And yeah, she's going to get to that 15 degrees on Wednesday, and then she will conjunct the South Node on Saturday. And at that same time, the moon will be in Pisces, and the moon will be going over the North Node next Saturday. So this is not a full moon, but it is the moon opposite Venus. And so there's a little dueling goddesses going on. And while they will receive some lovely application from Jupiter, and good energy from Jupiter, they are still going to be in an opposition on the nodes. So that's some emotional stuff we can expect to need to sort through. Some emotional stuff, some beauty things, women, whatever's going on for you. Maybe you'll feel some things a little more strongly at that time. Things might feel a little more agitated, or maybe just, very female. It just might be something that is a woman issue, like things between women, things between girlfriends, stuff that surfaces, people who are still having their cycle, that might be something that sorts itself, comes out during the 4th of October. And so we're looking at all that sort of goddess energy. And Jupiter is in Cancer, which is a very, very sensitive sign and does rule the moon. But that water moon in Pisces then, and Jupiter being connected to the moon and also Venus, and for a few days after that, that should really be something very sensitive, and you want to feel into that. You don't want to ignore whatever emotions come up. You want to go deep with it and connect, right? After that, moon will go over Saturn and then Neptune and just move on. But I found this interesting because, we are finishing eclipse season, and we will be finishing it, like I said, the full moon on Monday the 6th, which is at 14 degrees of Aries. And so the moon will move on and on to 14 degrees Aries by Monday. But the nodes are at a critical point in the eclipses. They create the eclipse season. They create the eclipse energy. When the sun and the moon go to them, they are involved in the eclipse. And they determine where the eclipses are and how they're going to happen, and which one is it, the south node eclipse, is it a north node eclipse, what's going on, lunar, solar, because of the nodes. So when the nodes are hot from an eclipse, and then we get Venus and the moon going over them at the same time, well, yeah, we're going to get some heated energy left over from the eclipse, I think. So as we experience that full moon exhale into fiery Aries, I think we're going to have some feminine energy exhale at the same time. So if you feel like exhaling all of the stuff you've been through in the last couple weeks, I highly recommend it. Sort out your feelings, sort out your energy, clear up whatever is, has been hanging in the air this week, and, do what you can energetically, emotionally for yourself to keep the energies moving and not getting stuck in eclipse stuff. So, and it could be sort of just like a final like I always look at the week after the eclipses are finished. So, last week was after the eclipse, but this is the final week of eclipse season that we're going into. And this is really sort of clearing out everything we've experienced. So do a space cleanse, clear the vibe in your house, clear your energy, yourself, do an emotional cleanse, a spiritual cleanse, work with the energy that's around us so that you can really sort through what has happened. Do some journaling, do some deep breathing, some breath work, do some meditation, stuff to help sort of process everything that's happened, work with the energy, and sort of lighten up your experience, I think this is really important to pay attention to as we close this eclipse period. It is a cycle, and all cycles beginning and end, they begin, they end, and then they, go into a new cycle. And that's a different vibe than what we've been through in these last few weeks. So I frankly felt the second eclipse more than the first eclipse. I know that the first eclipse was stronger. Last Sunday during the eclipse, my neighbor said to me, he said, I don't see you as yourself. I don't see you, like there's something off. And I'm like, yeah, it's the eclipse. And he said, do you think that knowing that makes you feel the eclipse more, like just because you know that it's the eclipse that you're going to sort of fall into that energy? And I said, it's a good question. And I think it's a good question for everyone to ponder. If you don't know it's an eclipse and it's an eclipse, I think you're going to get it anyway, especially if it's on your planets. I've had people call me and say, hey, I felt really good this last week, or not this time around, but like other times. I felt like this really incredible energy and all these great things are happening. What is it? Well, it's an eclipse. Now, that can happen during an eclipse. Eclipses don't make our lives fall apart. I'll never forget that eclipse last year, and you'll probably remember me talking about it if you've been listening to me for over a year. That one where it was the first eclipse of last year, and the moon was in Virgo. I think it was South Node And it was all on Neptune, and it felt so good. On Neptune, it was just so peaceful. I think it was a solar eclipse no, it would have been a lunar eclipse because the moon would have been on Neptune, which was in Pisces. And it was so peaceful. It was so lovely. And I remember it just wasn't, but the second one was like a bureaucratic nightmare last year. And I feel like for whatever reason, I felt the first one, it was intense, it was energy, and I felt, like your world is being shaken up, right? And the second one, like all the manifestations of eclipse season came out for me. So it was complicated. I mean, I feel like I was holding my breath until Wednesday, and then I started to know, no, something's coming. Something's coming. So, yeah. And, back to my neighbor's question, to finish that, I said, there are times when I'm not looking at the ephemeris or whatever, I'm not looking, but I feel kind of weird and I don't know what's going on. And then I look and I go, oh yeah, it's this. I remember this, because I'm reporting on it regularly, but also it might have slipped my mind what day it was happening. And it's always something. And we're always experiencing something. So this is why I gave you that list of things that I use to handle my life, and meditation and homeopathy and breath work and that I was talking about 2 weeks ago, or maybe it was 3 weeks ago on the first eclipse. Yes, it's been 3 weeks already since that first eclipse. And I think it's important. To have some practices in place that you rely on that help sort through your feelings, your emotions, while you're going through this time. It's really important. So work with your energy. Don't just forget about it. Oh, eclipses are over, yay. This is eclipse hangover week. So this is the week when we sort out all that. I feel instinctively it's going to be a better week. It's not Mars Pluto. We don't have heavy duty stuff. I think there's other things going on this week, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, but there is a certain amount of relief happening this week. It's not a heavy aspect like Mars Pluto. There's other things, but not to that intensity. So we are going to have the moon was in Sagittarius right now, and it's going to get to Aquarius on Wednesday. So last week on Wednesday, the moon went into Scorpio, and that's how it touched Pluto. It squared it. But a week later, and you may remember this every time I talk about like lunar cycles, the moon stays in its quarters. We're going to have this second quarter tomorrow where it's, squaring the sun. And so that's going to be at 7:54 p.m. The moon in Capricorn will square the sun in Libra. But on Wednesday, since last Wednesday, the moon squared Pluto, this Wednesday, the moon is going to conjunct Pluto in Aquarius. And that's going to be 6:29 p.m. on Wednesday. And that's important to pay attention to because maybe some of the story from last week will be winding down. I sure hope so. And, now it's a conjunction. So now we're looking at that as opposed to some things that were happening with Mars and stuff. Mars is not going to be, Mars will have moved on enough so that there won't be a lot of that energy in our way. So, for example, okay, so that's October 1st. We're already in October, guys. Can you believe it? The last 3 months of the year. Mars will be at 6 Scorpio, so there might be a little pinch of when that happens, but that's after the moon squares Mars, which isn't going to be until Thursday at 4:29 a.m. So the moon is making that round, and we are paying attention to the moon because, remember, it's still hot from an eclipse. And that's what I think enhanced that Mars-Pluto last week, was that the moon came in conjunct Mars, and it was still hot from the eclipse. So now we're like, moon is going to go over Pluto, and I can see that I'm looking at my wheel. And then, Mars will be an aspect the next day because Mars is past all that Pluto business. So the moon will touch Mars in a square, but it'll be the next day. Meanwhile, on Wednesday, when we have moon on Pluto, we're going to get Mercury in Libra squaring Jupiter. So that's going to be very interesting because Mercury will be at 22 degrees of Libra. And Jupiter is at 22 degrees Cancer. And so this is very interesting because that's a cardinal square. And they're loosely involved with Chiron. Chiron is at 25 Aries, so they're loosely involved with that. But it's really Mercury in Libra is very fair, is balanced, is serene, is very rational when it comes to its thought processes. And, Libra is fairly rational, maybe not as rational as like Capricorn or Virgo, but it's balanced in its opinions. And so Mercury square Jupiter is open and a wide gaze of observance and looking at how things are opening up, conversations are opening up, opportunities are opening up, things are being more clear maybe. And Mercury Jupiter can get a little high strung. It's like optimistic energy. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Let's do this. I have a Mercury Jupiter square. It's not exact. It's a wide square. So I will feel this. It's a recurrence for me. So this is, an interesting dynamic where Mercury, planet of communication in all things writing, speaking, telling our truth, speaking our truth with Jupiter and Cancer. This is a very pleasant and lovely way to speak our truth, right? So Jupiter is exalted there. Jupiter likes being in the sign of Cancer, and it's actually a really good opportunity for a heart-to-heart talk with someone, to express your ideas, to raise your optimism, to look at your belief systems, because Jupiter is about beliefs. And Mercury is about how do I think about that? How do I believe in that? Do I believe in that? What do I believe in? And looking at your belief systems and maybe coming to some recognition or realization or epiphany about some of your beliefs. So this is important because our beliefs drive our life, okay? Our beliefs drive our life, and they are so important to look at, become conscious of, and change if they do not serve us. They are majorly an issue if they are beliefs that are not supportive to what life we want to live. You might believe in something that is not serving you because you were taught to believe in that in school or by your parents when you were a kid. And so looking at our beliefs, paying attention to our beliefs, working with our beliefs is really significant, and to really understand our beliefs and how we use that and how it sort of reinforces the things in our lives. Very important to do this. So Mercury to Jupiter opens up the door for that. It also provides other opportunities. Somebody may call you and say, hey, I've got a job for you. Or, hey, I really want to invest in your business, or something, work related. And like I said, a heart-to-heart talk. Maybe it's a good time to have a talk with your kids. Maybe your partner, your business partner, your parents, whatever. But Mercury in Libra usually softens the blow. They don't want conflict. Libra does not want conflict, and we are in Libra season. And the sun in Libra has been making nice relationships to the outer planets, as it did last week, except it's been, it followed that eclipse, so that was, it was kind of heated. The sun is always hot, right? So we're looking at really talking through our beliefs and speaking our truth. And if something is no longer true for you, then you need to work through your beliefs about it. If it's not true and you say, why am I saying that? Wow. Sometimes with Jupiter, things you could open your mouth before you realize what you're saying, so you're like, I believe that? I don't want to believe that anymore. And so changing your beliefs is deep work. I do that work in my expansion mentoring. I work with you on your beliefs. There's beliefs that we want to change, and I have patterns to work through that with you. I also do this Joe Dispenza meditation called Changing Beliefs and Perceptions, and that really helps with changing beliefs and like what you don't want to continue believing and what you do want to continue believing, what you want to start believing. And the most important belief that we can have is the belief in ourselves. And looking during this time with Mercury and Jupiter, looking at where we believe in ourselves, where we might not believe in ourselves, is very important. And sort of taking that and working with that and understanding where we don't necessarily believe in ourselves in something, and it may be confidence, it may not be. It's just like, I don't believe in it. I don't believe in me here. I don't believe I can do that. I don't believe I'm that kind of person. It's so deep. So many things are deep. With beliefs, they go so intensely within us that we have to look at them, and we have to really clear out the ones that don't serve us. Now, this week, like I said, is relatively quiet, except for that business on Wednesday where the moon conjuncts Pluto and reminds us of last week, and Mercury squares Jupiter. And then we are on our way to this full moon. And this full moon is going to be so freeing. It's at 14 degrees of Aries, but it means that the sun will be at 14 degrees of Libra. And if you have something at 14 Libra, 14 Aries, 14 Capricorn, or 14 Cancer, this should be something that speaks to you and speaks to your chart. The other thing is that it will make a semi-square to 29 fixed. Now, in this moment, we don't have anything at 29 fixed. From what I'm looking at, we're not there. We have Uranus at 1 degree Gemini, which puts it very close to 29 fixed, but it's not there. It's not 29 Taurus. So really, if you have something at 29 degrees of the fixed signs, that would be Taurus, that would be Scorpio, that would be Leo, and Aquarius. You are going to feel this particular full moon, okay? But I'm looking forward to this full moon, and we will meet again next Sunday, the 5th, before the full moon on the 6th, because it's another week before that event actually happens. But this is I'm looking forward to it because I always look forward to that lunation that kicks out the eclipse season. And I'm looking forward to, just clearing out whatever it is. It's Aries. It's a full moon in Aries. That's nice and juicy and fiery and free. And so I love freeing up the energy after an eclipse. So yeah, we're gonna feel that next week, and really there's nothing turbulent happening that same day. Mercury will go into Scorpio, but we're gonna talk more about these things as we go into next weekend's podcast. And right before that, when Mercury does leave the end of Libra, it is going to make an opposition to Chiron at 2:05 p.m. this Friday the 3rd. So we are experiencing that Mercury Chiron opposition after the Mercury Jupiter. So now I remember what I was saying, that Mercury and Jupiter and Chiron are in a loose T-square to one another because Mercury and Jupiter will be squaring, and then there's a few degrees away when Mercury will then move opposite Chiron. So there's components of that. So we'll be feeling all of that. And Jupiter's going to lighten it up in its exalted place for us. And it's a great opportunity to, like I said, beliefs that no longer speak to you, that probably came from wounds of your past. Okay? So this is where we want the past to turn into wisdom, right? So this is where we have an opportunity to do that with Jupiter, Mercury, and Chiron. And that's an interesting dynamic because you don't see that very often, where Mercury comes in and is opposing Chiron, talking to Jupiter or square. And while Jupiter and Chiron are not exactly in a square, that will come closer as we move through the weeks and months. I really feel that Jupiter at 22 Cancer has been a blessing through this eclipse period because it's in a wide trine to Saturn, and it was in a wide trine to both eclipses. It wasn't really a tight trine, but it was wide enough to support the energy and keep us going. And Jupiter in Cancer is a blessing, Jupiter is always a blessing, but it's particularly a blessing in its exaltation place. And so it is really giving us a supportive outlet for all of this energy that's been hard during the eclipse, okay? The eclipse season, both of the eclipses. So it really was making good relationships to the first one and the second one. Although it was wide, in its relationship, it was still supportive enough. And the moon eventually got to the relationship with Jupiter after the eclipse was over. So, because the moon moved along very quickly. So I like where Jupiter has been. We've been fortunate. It's been supporting us, and this is a good thing. So thank you, Jupiter, for all your blessings. The Jupiter trine to the North Node also is something to pay attention to, because they've been trining for a while. As the North Node moves backwards and Jupiter moves forwards, they've been trining for a while. And this is actually something really helpful, because whenever you have a planet trining the North Node or sextiling, but particularly trining because it's a good support, like when you have Venus or Jupiter, a good planet, even if Pluto's trining the North Node, that could be helpful too. But particularly Jupiter and Venus, when they are trining the North Node, that the fulfillment of the North Node is going to happen. And also, if you have that in your chart, that the North Node is also kissing back at the planet. So say you have the North Node trine Venus. Your relationships are going to get the blessings of that North Node. Yes, your relationships are going to work out. It might be a long road, but they're going to work out. And that Venus North Node, or maybe Jupiter North Node dynamic, really helps you and supports you in fulfilling your goals and what's going to be your fulfillment in your life through that North Node, that direction that you're going. So I really do appreciate Jupiter's blessing on this eclipse season. And we don't have to talk about eclipses anymore. This is eclipse I'm just going to call this Eclipse Hangover Week. And we're going to move through this, and we're going to get to the other side. And eclipses always bring you something that is, you've changed after an eclipse, something that has changed you. It could be something that was stressful, or it could have been something that was really good. Maybe you got a promotion, maybe you got a raise, maybe you found a new job, maybe you had a good conversation with your family. My neighbor, she was telling me, one of my neighbors, she was saying, she's from, I think, Uruguay, and she was saying that she had the flu this week, but she had a deep healing conversation for 4 days with her visiting sister. So changed after that. And that's really important, and she was talking about, I've been running so much. I've been going here. And yeah, it's true. Like lots of times I'm like, where's Megu? She's not here. She's been out and about. But I said, that's what did it. When she told me her sister was here and they had deep healing conversations for 4 days, I said, that's what gave you the flu. It's always some emotional conflict resolution. And afterwards, the body has to release all of that. So that was hers. For me, it was like rising to the call of duty for my little kitty. So, and I'm very squeamish about that. I don't want to see her in pain. So obviously, this was a little challenging for me, a lot challenging for me. So, but this is my point. Eclipses change you. You can say, okay, I'm more resilient than I thought I was. I can believe in myself a little more now. And that comes as a result of the changes that the eclipses bring. So I hope the eclipses have blessed you with some good changes and forward thinking and forward positive energy as you move through your week. If you need to see me for an astrology session, please connect with me on my website, The Golden Astrologer. And there you can go to book online and just click that and choose the session you want, whether it's astrology, whether it's Reiki, whatever it should be. Or if you want to do expansion mentoring with me, certainly contact me and talk to me about it. info@thegoldenastrologer.com. And you can also write me at deb@debmcbride.com. I hope to be on Instagram more this week, The Golden Astrologer, and I will see you there and on the internet. Have a beautiful week ahead. Enjoy this winding out of the eclipse. Connect with your beliefs and work through what you need to. And I will see you on the internet and on this podcast next Sunday. Thank you so much for listening. Gratitude to all.